Hi, my name is Viola, and I've been interviewing my dad about his 1997 Everest summit climb. He went with Nova, and they actually filmed a documentary about cognitive function on Everest, and that's called Everest the Death Zone if you want to watch. His team members included some pretty famous climbers like David Brashears, Ed Viesturs, Guy Cotter, and a few others. And even though this was 30 years later, I'm suddenly curious about it, so I thought I'd ask him questions and share that online. So that's how I started the series, My Dad Climbed Everest. And it's originally formatted for TikTok, so that's the way it is on here, but I wanted to make these compilations anyway. And in today's video, we're talking about frostbite on Everest, if he's ever gotten it, kind of what it is, all those details. Then again, talking more about deceased people on Everest, staying there, and how they're kind of landmarks sometimes now. He gives his opinion on that. He gives another book recommendation, and he explains why he goes back to Nepal so often. He's been like 15 times since his Everest climb. And lastly, he talks about the Sherpa that helped him the most in his climb. So enjoy.
We had to warm his feet in our armpits just to make sure that he didn't get frostbite. Did I ever get frostbite on, and I assume they're talking about Everest, but I'll kind of be broad about it, on any of my climbs, including Everest. I've never gotten frostbite on Everest or any of my climbs because I had good gear. I also really made myself eat properly with the proper nutrition, and also, most importantly, I stayed hydrated. Because I think when you get dehydrated on these big mountains, that can lead to frostbite, especially when you're above 8,000 meters. Nobody on the climbs that I've been on, or clients at that matter, had any frostbite or anything that I can remember. You might have some frost nip, like on your face, or things like that, but nobody got frostbite. Now, I will tell you, on a climb I did in 1990 on Aconcagua in Argentina, on summit day, that particular day, our clients had bailed on us. It was just guides on that, climbing to the summit. That summit day was very windy and very cold, and that was the coldest I think I've ever been on a mountain. It was in 1990, going up to the summit on Aconcagua. And one of the guys had to take, we climbed up to this little lean-to hut, and he had to take his boots off, and we had to warm his feet in our armpits just to make sure that he didn't get frostbite. And we warmed him up, had some liquid, and we shot up to the summit and got back down, and he was fine. But no, never had frostbite. Sometimes, they got to do amputation. So frostbite looks like, if you've been exposed to it, one, it tips of your finger could be extremely like white, or they'll turn black if there's tissue damage, and it's a really nasty looking injury, and it usually comes on, the blackness will kind of expand down your finger, and it's basically dead tissue. And it usually takes a few months to figure out if that tissue is going to be able to grow back or be saved. Sometimes, they got to do amputation. I know in the 96 disaster, Beck Weathers, the guy that spent the night out in the open, had his face all frostbit, and his hand, I think he lost part of his hand and part of his nose to frostbite. And if you look at the pictures from 1996 disaster, you'll see Beck Weathers getting medical treatment at Camp 2 on Everest, and his face is just black, his nose is black, and his hand is wrapped in gauze. The other thing about frostbite, as you thaw out, as the blood kind of comes back in circulation, it's extremely painful. And a lot of times people have to take, painkillers for that pain. It just throbs. So it's not a good thing to have. But, I always like to say, frostbite is kind of preventable if you have the right gear and you're hydrated, and you can make good decisions in the mountain, like when to turn around, especially. I don't think green boots was there in 1997 when I summited. We did see a few bodies. Some of those people were from 1996. I also say I was so focused, and I was I was just a climbing robot basically, and I just remember stepping over Bruce and get on those fixed ropes and started climbing up the Hillary step and breathing heavily. My heart rate was maxed out, and I was just climbing and thinking about survival the whole time, especially on that summit day. I was looking at where every handhold was, every foothold was, and not wanting to make a mistake. So I didn't want to get distracted by anything else. So that's how it was, for good and for bad. I mean, there's bodies up there and there are landmarks, but I think a lot of them do get hauled away now or put in crevasses for proper burial. I think they've made a big effort in the last few years to bring bodies down. I was reading about some guys that climbed the Lhotse, which is an 8,000 meter peak right next to Everest, and you go up this gully, and at the top of the gully there's a body up there, but you're very intimate with it because you have to work around it. And I think that body's been up there for a while. And yeah, it's one of the ugly things about the whole situation. And I think it's gotten probably a lot more bodies up there since I was there. But it should be a reminder to how dangerous it is up there, that if anything goes wrong, you're probably not going to be able to self-evacuate yourself. And you have to realize people that are up there don't have the energy to bring down somebody that's dying or, immobile or dead. It's very dangerous. It's very dangerous. If it was doable, a lot of these bodies would get dragged back down, but it's pretty dangerous. Why do I go back to Nepal so often? I like the Nepalese people. They're genuine. They're very intelligent. They're the type of people, and I've said this before, that you want in a foxhole next to you when shit gets bad. Feel safe there. And whenever I can bring people from Indiana or wherever to Nepal, they always walk away with a love for Nepal. And most of the people I bring there always go back to Nepal because of the people. He also was the guy that organized the 1996 Everest IMAX. Wang Chu Sherpa was my climbing Sirdar 1991. That was the first time I met Wang Chu. He was in his 20s back then. I think we were the same age. He was in charge of the Sherpa crew on that climb. He was a wonderful person, very driven, very good climber, very good organizer, but most importantly, he was a great leader of men under stressful situations. And I got to know him then, and he started his own guide service trekking company shortly after the 91 trip. And then he was Sirdar once again on the 97 trip for David Bashir's, and he was kind of in charge of the Sherpas, and he did a great job organizing that trip. I can't say enough about Wang Chu, just a great person, great organizer, and he's rather famous in the 90s in Nepal. He also was the guy that organized the 1996 Everest IMAX trip, and all those Sherpas, and getting all that gear and all that camera stuff up for Dave Brashears up there. And Wang Chu is also, whenever I would trek to Nepal, I'd use Wang Chu Peak Promotions as my guide service. And because I know whenever I use those guys, everything is going to be taken care of. I'm going to have a good crew, good Sherpa crew. And he died in 2015 from colon cancer, which was tragic for Nepal. But his daughter, Lakba, has taken over the company and runs Wang Chu Peak Promotions. And it's a great organization. Most of the Sherpas come from a village called Changba, which we've helped build a school there and a hospital and some water facilities for getting water down to the huts in the village. But Lakba has taken over that company, and she's a great organizer, very trustworthy, and I highly recommend Wangchu Peak Promotions for trekking in Nepal or climbing. Somebody always asks for a book recommendation on climbing in the Himalayas. This book here is a great book called Beyond Everest, and Pem Sherpa is from Changba. I've known Pem for a few years. He lives in Ann Arbor, Michigan now. This story is about climbing and living in Nepal from the Sherpa perspective, and all the things that Pem had to overcome: extreme poverty, caste system, no good jobs in Nepal that paid anything other than like guiding. And it also talks about how he managed to, the end of his climbing career, how he managed to kind of immigrate to the United States. It's a great book. But it gives you a good perspective on what it's like to guide on Everest as a Sherpa, and what it's like to work with Western groups up there as a guy, as guiding people. What it's like to live in Nepal and to fight all the stuff that's kind of pulling you down. Like I said, the extreme poverty, the lack of jobs, well-paying jobs, lack of education. Corrupt government, things like that. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. It's an easy read, but my recommendation